It's time to get, hold on. It's time to get started. We are here live in the Nutmeg Tavern. It's Friday again. And we've got to have fun in the Nutmeg Tavern. It's nice and cozy. It's cold outside. We've got snow and ice and all kinds of fun stuff. Thank goodness last Friday we did all those nice warm drinks, talked about warm drinks. And the drink episode will be coming up, not on Sunday, but on the Sunday after that, because it's a giant episode. So it's going to take a little extra work there in the cutting room. But we do have something coming up on this Sunday. I see all kinds of folks crowding into the Nutmeg Tavern from places like New Mexico and Budapest and Northumberland and who knows where else, just like from everywhere. So you guys, if you're from far-flung places and you want to, raise your hand and say howdy, please do so in the chat. I love to see all that. We are going to be talking about winter because it's winter time, and we want to get into some period images of winter. I don't think the artists of the 18th century were all that excited about going outside and painting paintings in the winter time.
Strangely, there's a lot more spring art.
Yeah, strangely enough, a lot more spring art. In fact, if you kind of dig into, maybe you look at the diaries of people from the time period, especially you look at something like maybe Nicholas Creswell, definitely, or Peter Kalm, who was traveling about 1750 or so, 1749, in the colonies. And wintertime, he basically stays inside and reads newspapers and other books. So he basically retranscribes things out of magazines and newspaper articles from this time period because he doesn't have anything better to do in the wintertime. And then he complains about his ink freezing in the inkhorn. In the inkwell because it was that cold. He's from places like Finland, where they're used to it being cold and they have these giant stoves. And here in America, it was super cold and they just lived with it. So they tried to burn a lot of wood. That's what they did. But we've got these wonderful images that we want to go through, and we had some fun kind of picking these out. Hold on a second. Let me light a candle here. There we go. We had some fun picking out images. The vast majority, in fact, all of these are going to be basically European. A few of them might be English, UK, not really.
Most of them are just European.
Right.
I think the Moorlands are English, but
yeah. So the vast majority are very European in their context, and I mean, there's some reasons for that. Some of them are early, all the way into the 16th century, just because they kind of give us some context. A lot of times we got to pull some things out of the 16th and the 17th century to compare them to how little or how much things changed and what things look like in the 18th century, and then maybe even a few out of the 19th century so we can kind of, gauge back and forth. So let's jump in. We've got snow outside now, at least we do, and we want to see what snowy images were like in our time period. So boom, let's go for this. So this is one of these early images. You can tell by the clothing that the people are wearing, but I think the actions and some of the environment are basically the same as what's going on later on. And these are Dutch and from this 16th century. Actually, they are very reminiscent of Bruegel images from that same time period, although they're not Bruegel. But they tend to be vast and have a lot of people filling up the scene, doing many different things. And sometimes they're very allegorical, probably a lot of times because of the sponsorship of the image. So these artists tend to, they paint to what people pay them to paint, and so that's kind of what they do. This one, we have this beautiful outdoor fire scene that's going on here in the foreground. People huddled around the fire, warming up. They're holding their hands up to their fire. They're poking it with sticks and whatnot. I don't see them doing any cooking over the fire, just hanging out. People bringing firewood to these fires. And you can even notice the trees that are around there, anything that's not the really tall tree, they're pollarded trees where they would take a stump and they would cut off all the limbs, and then the tree's still alive, it shoots out more limbs, and then people just cut them off and they keep harvesting more and more of these little pieces of firewood. We can see all these sticks are not big sticks. This apparently is, kind of a dam area holding out the ocean or whatever. And so people are all along that, and we've got people skating and falling down on the ice, and it looks like a lot of merriment going on. And the seagoing vessels and other vessels here are frozen in, basically. I don't think the ice is probably thick enough that it would break the ships like it can if it gets, super, super icy. It's kind of typical of what you see in a lot of these areas where it kind of gets icy enough, but it's not too bad. We just get to see the close-up here of the fire, and I love the way the artist was able to put those little bits of fire in there. I think he does an excellent job. We kind of see close up here what it's made out of, but I wish I was that good of an artist. Anyway, people falling down and hopefully getting back up.
He'll get around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure.
It's very, very common in the skating pictures to have someone falling down. And I haven't quite figured out what they're trying to say, but it's almost every.
Well, I think it's just what happens, right?
True.
So why not paint it like what really happens? These interesting little sled, little mini toboggan things where people will use basically ice pick sticks to move them along on the ice. Some people just walking around with their regular shoes, and other people having interesting sort of ice skates to move around on the water. Get to see that really high-end sleigh here in the foreground, and I mean everything's. All the sleighs look like pretty high-end pieces there, and even the background of the cityscape. And we can kind of see the seawalls around that city and all the windmills there. And I used to think windmills were mostly a European thing, or even Great Britain, but apparently there were a lot in America. Of course, we just don't have images of those, so we can't see how ubiquitous windmills would have been in the colonies, especially in the 17th and early 18th century. This is another image. This one's been kind of, I see you fixed it. Did you crop them out?
Yeah, and I brightened it up just a little bit too, because this one was a little dim.
Yeah.
But I like this one too.
This one's got crazy things going on it. We can see that city in the far background, people playing on the ice, the fire, a much smaller fire, and then we have a house fire going on in this middle ground. And people, fighting the fire and, yelling out the window and everything. So we can imagine how much more dangerous, people are heating their houses with lots and lots of basically open fires. And fire was a much more dangerous and probably common thing going on. So let's see, we got some close-ups here. Yep, there's a close-up of what's going on with that fire and the campfire, the water wheel. So apparently water flows right down beside this mill, and there's even someone carrying a bag of probably grain into that mill, although I don't think that wheel is going to turn anytime soon. And people carrying the same kind of small firewood to it. Notice the little stick. It almost looks like a a golf club here, and the person in red, he's got that. He's pointing someplace. And we'll see those used later on. Here are people rushing. They're with a ladder. People carrying buckets. We got the fire. We got the ladder on the roof. We got somebody hanging out the window of the house. And we talked about this early on about fire and Benjamin Franklin dealing with fire. And not only were houses supposed to have a certain number of fire buckets so that they could contribute to either fighting their own fire or fires in the neighborhood, but they would also have baskets and other things to carry household goods out of a house that's on fire. So you kind of were trying to put out the fire, and you're also carrying out anything that was useful, and they wanted to systematically kind of deal with that. Here we have a whole, basically, community trying to fight this particular fire. People on the ice, very similar images, similar artist, and we have same things going on here. And notice we have sort of a hockey type thing going on here. The sticks they look more like golf clubs, but I imagine it's something like hockey. I don't know what's going on for that kind of...
They're playing an ice game.
Yeah, some kind of ice game, 17th century, with sticks and balls or whatever that is on the ice. Some kind of black lion dog looking thing. And people wearing capes, and obviously it's a little different than clothing than people would be wearing in the 18th century. You can see that fuzzy, foggy cityscape.
I didn't want to leave it out. Even
Right.
with this background, he still managed to get in the feel of the city, and I
the
really
snow.
liked it.
He peppers it with snow and the birds on the wing. So amazing job. This is an artist, and there'll be a lot here with this particular artist, who's again European and from the middle of the 18th century, I believe, maybe even later on in that 18th century. Look, obviously kind of shaggy wintertime horses, and the dog, the people walking in the cold. One of them's got a muff, and one of them has an axe, so he can cut firewood, right? People walking in the slippery ground in the foreground, in the background, and interesting kind of wintertime scene for our time period, which again you don't see necessarily that many of. Now there were times here in the 18th century, in the early 19th century, and apparently earlier on, where they had these mini ice ages. They had cooler times than were kind of normal, and people's habits kind of had to change to meet up with that. I think it's one of the contexts of the clothing that we don't normally see as much. One of the things that's driving fashion is changes in the climate.
Yeah.
They're wearing a lot of clothes even in the summertime, probably because it just plain doesn't get as hot. Now, we thought this was interesting. Same artist here, and he just sort of transports the central characters into a new background. Boom. There's a little bit of changes here and there. His coat changes. It's still the same color. The horses are basically the same. So he's probably already sketched these out, and he just blop,
But
drops
the dog's in a slightly different, he's moving differently.
Drops them into...
The two people are, I think the man's holding something different. But it's not, they're very small changes.
Right. He was happy carrying an axe here.
It could be one of those games, where you find the...
Yeah, circle what's changed. And here he has just sort of a bag here. And I thought it was kind of fun to see that change. It looks like it's the very same person on the horse, the same yellow jacket.
That yellow jacket looks pretty distinct.
And interestingly enough, notice how his tricorn hat is on backwards. So he's got this basically straight on backwards. And even the cockade should be on, kind of moved around 180 degrees there. And if we, even though we're seeing the front of him here, if we go back to this image here, you can see he's still got it on backwards, even in these shots, or images, paintings, I guess I should say. He's pulling here, and it looks like the same two horses, that he was he was moving along in the other scene. Got them hitched to this kind of carriage operation here. It's interesting that it's a kind of the front half is down kind of like the hood of a car, you know. You don't normally kind of think of them constructed in this manner. I don't know whether their legs are sticking through that or there's just cargo in the front. We can see a very interesting portmanteau on the front of this wagon, and it is sprung. Interesting kind of springs that are vertical, and then a big kind of strap that holds that together so that it keeps it from being too a rugged ride, I guess I would say. Somebody carrying sticks in the background, another person cold with their hands under their arms. Notice you don't see winter. I mean, it's like the person inside the coach here looks like they have a great coat on. But normal people are walking around in essentially the same kind of clothing they would wear any other time of the year. Again, I think it's the same artist, and we've got heavy cloaks that somebody's wearing in the background with their horse. You see some people using a lot more sort of blankets and whatnot to stay warm. The muffs are very constant. We see in so many of these paintings, they've got tied shoes on their feet. Obviously it's cold, even though we don't have any snow on the ground in that image. Some of these images are just, here for the beauty of it, right? There isn't a lot of particular detail other than, interesting architecture in the background. Very European in its architecture. I don't think you'd see too many houses like this in America. I'm intrigued. I mean, this is a bit impressionistic. I can't really tell what the person here in the foreground is carrying. She might have coals, kind of an interesting glowing, red there, but I can't really, tell from the detail. Again, it's wintertime. She's not dressed incredibly warm.
A lot of times I'll be looking at the pictures and I'll be like, their shoes that do not look like they're quite up for this sort of thing.
Yeah, it's like I can't imagine how cold my feet would be if that were me. This one we don't have as many pixels to work with, kind of a little blurry, but a nice winter scene, people out on the ice. You're very European feeling. No, it seems like we have maybe somebody with in the foreground there with a hunting gun, a fusil or something like that. And some dogs there. They can't leave dogs out of here. We do have some interior scenes that are obviously winter time in their context. Bright roaring fire and people still in lots of clothes.
That's right.
They look like, it's like, okay, I'm going to try to stay warm.
Like he's wearing his hat, this very fluffy hat inside.
He's wearing his almost like a Canadian cap, fur cap on the inside. He's got mules that he's wearing. These are sort of heelless shoes or, just sort of slip-on shoes. Now, we talked about whether or not we'd seen this image in past live streams, and just exactly what's on the plate here, I don't even want to guess.
I'm not sure we ever did decide.
Maybe they're giant sausages or something, or you really don't know. But something interesting. And I think the next thing is what's going on above their heads. So here's above their heads, and we can see a wreath there, which we don't see a lot of.
No, we don't.
With the canto lantern right there, and then more storage of vegetables and cabbages and all that good stuff, kind of way up high, out of the reach of rodents and such, and probably where it kind of can dry and not get too frozen and go bad. Notice the little window there; it's got birds in it, like little chickens or something, apparently living in their house, which I don't recommend. It's hard to housebreak your chickens. They're just not helpful to live in your house with you. Some of the scenes are obviously very picturesque. We get kind of ruins here. I'm not sure about that interesting house there on the ice. what's going on with that. Be an interesting explanation about what that represents there. And people skating. Not a lot of people in this particular scene, and I don't know whether the person there that is a gun over their shoulder or whether it's something else. The dog's running along excitedly. And now, obviously, we're getting probably early 19th century with an image like this, which is so sharp and precise, very reminiscent of some of the 18th century kind of Chinese art with the mountains and the trees and everything. And possibly with the trade that's going on back and forth, that this might actually be kind of
influenced by that art
by
style.
that. That kind of feel, the ruins and the whole mountain that cascades behind that. But we have a beautiful kind of picturesque house here. And even though it's snowy, the water has not frozen because we have boats on the water. We don't have any skaters. But an amazing scene, that's for certain. And apparently the waterfalls haven't frozen yet. They're still waterfalling there.
Maybe it's 28 degrees.
Yeah. Well, you get that first snow, and the ground hasn't gotten really cold yet sometimes, and so it's very picturesque without the water freezing up. Here you can see Lauren's made a note here. This person, the same artist as a lot of the ones kind of we saw earlier, with the people kind of close up. It's a man that's selling hair ribbons in Denmark, and right there in the middle of that 18th century kind of time frame. And we can tell it's wintertime. He's got on that coat, it's buttoned up. A lot of the coats in the time period were double-breasted like this, but when you're wearing it, you would actually kind of button the double-breasted back on itself and kind of have it open. Here it's all buttoned up and closed up, and you can tell it's probably kind of early because of the way the coat is cut, that it's cut kind of close down at the front instead of cutting back. And he's, you can tell he's kind of a street seller. His buckles on his shoes are not great, and he's a little ragged, but I mean he looks happy enough selling his hair ribbons. We've probably seen, I've seen this image a lot. It's the animal here that this person has is a marmot, maybe something like a groundhog, and he's got an instrument there like a schwam. It's a double reeded instrument, like say let's call it a very primitive oboe. And he's going around, and we can tell it's winter time because there's no leaves on the trees and everything's kind of brown. But he's going from town to town and doing his entertainment and making the little bit of money here. He doesn't have his hat on. He doesn't even have a hat. That sort of again tells us he's kind of down and out, but obviously he's got rosy cheeks and all that. Now this image, we've seen here in the past. Probably somebody coming home from the wars.
The title's A Soldier Returning.
Yeah, Soldier Returning. He's got, and this is probably late 18th century, early 19th century. The musket, his military hat is actually on his pack, and he's got a sort of a round hat, a working hat on his head, still wearing his regimental coat and some of his gear. And his wife may have gone to war with him, so as a camp follower, and so she's following along, and they're heading home in this cold winter. Now, people would sometimes, wintertime comes and you don't do military campaigns in the wintertime, at least if you're smart, and so there are times when you would go home for a while. The Revolutionary War soldiers in America, early on in the war, they would go home, and then later on, it's like, no, we're not going to let you guys go home anymore. We're going to keep you the entire time because it took so much longer to gear everybody up. So you want to kind of keep everybody close at hand. But here's somebody going home. Maybe it's after the war. We obviously have some kind of a snowball altercation going on here. Boys maybe attacking some poor woman who's walking home. Dog is not happy. Who knows? I don't know the story.
No, there was no subtitle that told us exactly. Yeah, I believe it is.
Yeah,
Moreland,
this is
yes.
Moreland. Yeah. Oh, yeah. We can see the signature there. Yeah. If we look really, when I looked at this kind of up close, if you look at these two people in context on the right here, if you just crop in on them, they look like adults, but I think they're supposed to be teens or whatever, causing their own little problem. In the wintertime, snowballs.
It's hard to resist.
Right. Maybe they were throwing them at each other. That's why the hat is off,
they got
and then,
distracted. That's right.
And it's like, oh, there's somebody else we can throw them at. Again, I believe this is Moreland, and somebody's fallen on the ice.
Once again, they've fallen on the ice.
Right, so people falling on the ice, little donkeys and whatnot in the background. We get more of those kind of genre paintings later on in the century. So this is, I kind of didn't want to, leave out Spanish paintings. So this is from Spain in the time period. And, again, looking for similarities and dissimilarities. We see some interesting things going on here with what's going on with their footwear and their gaiters and leggings, which are so similar in some ways to what's going on in North America. The coat that the person's wearing here in the foreground is almost like a capote that you would see like a Canadian coat. So it's like, whoa, this is very, very, reminiscent. In fact, if you kind of cut off that part of the painting here without the three men in the center, if you just took those first two people, you would say, oh, that looks like North America. Mm-hmm. The outfits and what's going on in the snow and all that. The three center people there with the blankets over them. I mean, interesting variations there. And don't even ask me what's going on with the giant donkey, mule, whatever, with the pig.
He's doing it. He's toting him along. They're going somewhere.
Its back. It's already been gutted. It's waiting to go. Again with the story of. And
to me, the mule's tack looks very high end for this type of job.
Yes, it does.
Right?
It does. Again with the story, I do not know. Maybe it's supposed to be the three wise men.
But it looks very wintry, is what it looks like.
But yes, it's wintry, even down to the dog who looks cold.
Yes, he does.
Here's 1810, some military conquest going on in Europe, and lots of people marching around in wagons and artillery and troops. Some conquest of some interesting fortress here. Very wintry.
And I'm sure that as people were mentioning different, you had talked about how winter's not the most common time for winter maneuvers, but there are times when it will happen. But I'm sure that every single soldier is deeply not pleased about
Well, I mean, we can imagine, when you do attack in the wintertime, it is surprise. Like, Washington crossing to Delaware,
no one expected that.
Hey, haha, Christmas Day, here we are. That wasn't very nice. Some of these, here we go later on, 1838, compare this with the 16th century images of people on the ice. Here it's, much more colorful, kind of different kinds of colors. Now, we were talking about that here, Lauren and I, about just, some of the colorfulness is probably a technical advances in the kind of paints and the pigments that you would have available. That you would have available to you when you're working, or sometimes it's just stylistic. Yeah. But we got people on the ice, horses, and little sleds and dogs and all that good stuff. Typical winter time scene, right? We see it every day. Are all the rest of these ones?
I believe, yes, this is where we're starting.
Right. So these are paintings or little drawings, images by an artist who was working in Latvia, and he was kind of comparing and contrasting the different cultural influences that were coming in at the time and the variations in the clothing. So it's specifically, look at the clothing, and that is influenced by this or that. So we see, some of these are very, very typical. Doesn't matter where you're at. Images like the people on the extreme right hand side of this. You might see that same outfit whether you're in Great Britain or in Germany or France or wherever. And then if we look over on the left-hand side, obviously we have some, maybe Russian influence or whatever that's going on there.
Or some of the, I don't know if we have any of the images, but some of them were in the kind of classic Latvian,
yes.
Winter gear they would have had.
Here's somebody who was selling fir branches for use during here as celebrations or, in front of funeral processions. It's got a special little kind of press that holds them down onto the wagon so they don't just blow off. And you can imagine this would shake and rattle as it's moving, and you got to hold everything together, but yet still make it so that you can remove things quickly. So you could probably undo one little quick rope. It would release the pressure. You'd be able to take out boughs and sell them and then retighten it quickly. He's got on one of those fur hats, very reminiscent of the Canadian caps, which you see all the time in northern North America. This is one of the reindeer herders from that area. You remember the name for him?
I believe it was a Nanette.
There we go. So, maybe.
And specifically in the, subtitle for it, it was talking about them coming and visiting. Like they weren't in town typically. They were just here for a visit.
Yeah. So they're, kind of probably up north and beyond rural.
Yes.
And bringing their items into trade or whatnot. Maybe that's why his sled is empty.
That's right. He's coming in to pick some stuff up.
All his furs or whatever he had with him. Two rich non-German women with their gear in their little sled here, and they've got kegs and bags, and you can tell it's a highly decorated piece. It's waiting for the horse or maybe the reindeer to come and hook it up in front of there. Her feet look like they're going to be really cold in those stylish shoes with high heels. How that works in the snow, I don't know, but there you go. And this is a set of drawings. The first woman here on the left has got items from the baker. Those are probably some kind of, look like they might be donut-y kind of things, or maybe pretzels or something like
delicious, that's for sure.
Now, some of these are wintertime, some of them aren't. The second one here is, I think, definitely a cold weather wintertime person. This is a person who's selling chai or tea. And if you look closely, what he's got there is a giant probably copper tea kettle with a cozy over the top of it. It looks like it's like a big cotton candy ball there, but it's actually probably a woolen cover over the top of it. And you can just see the spout sticking out. And it's got a socket on the bottom and a stick like a cane to hold it up so that he doesn't have to, carry the whole thing. And when he stops to sell something, he doesn't have to keep holding that thing up. And he just, takes the plug out of the top and tips it over and fills up your mug with hot tea in the wintertime. The next one here is, it says, what does it say? An older...
This was a wife of a Russian soldier, I believe. And she would bring in, berries and mushrooms and herbs that she had gathered in the forests around the city, and she'd come and bring them and sell them in the town.
Yeah, so wild harvested things to sell into the town to make that little bit of money. And then this last person, Lauren thought this was totally hilarious.
I couldn't help it. It's just so funny.
This person has slabs of salmon. So you can see some of it is draped over his shoulder. Other ones are on boards tied to that. Maybe they could be cooked right there on the boards.
Could be.
I don't know. I haven't seen, I mean, people want to reference the idea of planked fish. It's hard to, you don't see it in cookbooks. Maybe there are references in literature to planked fish in the 18th century, but who knows? Maybe that's what this is for. And notice his waistcoat, his vest here, or even sleeved jacket here is colored like salmon.
Yes, with the salmon dots on it.
Salmon dots and everything.
And the more I thought about it, I guess you're like, well, it'd be like someone who was selling like fast food and they had a branded shirt, right?
Right. Maybe you could sell like chicken nuggets, and you could have a chicken nugget outfit that you would wear. I don't know about that. Fascinating images as we dig into wintertime. And is our winter that exciting? Do we see people dressed in special things? And
well, we dress warm.
Yeah,
but it has to get kind of cold for us to do that, because we're usually moving from one heated area to another. So, but as it gets below 10 degrees, you dress for even the short periods of time you're out.
Every week I try to get to brand new and renewing YouTube and Patreon folks. I don't have any Patreon folks because, well, nobody's been doing that, but I do certainly have new and renewing YouTube members. Let's see. Craig Pataki, and then Rise Van Bardwick, Nathan Sparrow Tiong, MD Darmadi, Lunch at Uncle Jackson's with Chef Jason Harwood. That's kind of a long one there. Pootie Cat, OJS90, Seven Dust, and then I got some that are just super long time YouTube members: Johnny Mayo, Julie Stevens, Joyce Johnson, Max Arcool, Drenay65, Jay Saunders, John Kennington, and of course John Talley. Many of those names you have heard in the chat all the time. There's Speed and Style Tony, look at that. Speaking of people that I talk about all the time. So yeah, I've been, kind of living in, kind of winter mode right now, thinking about videos that kind of fit with that, and working on the video that'll be on this Sundays, and of course a lot of time that I spent on the warm drinks. Again, thinking about how different, how important, or at least how much change there is in people's attitudes and their actions, and how they had to prepare for wintertime in the 18th century versus what we do today. So it's like, don't forget to winterize your car. I don't even, it's like, what do you winterize? It used to be, 20 and 30 years ago, we would care too much about that. Now, our vehicles are so kind of self-contained that we don't really think about that much, except maybe don't forget to put your ice scraper, in your car.
Make sure your tires are up to winter driving.
That's about it. And, winterizing your houses. Sometimes we got to get out and put some extra insulation around. But I can't imagine the all-consuming effort that people would have to put into what's going on in the 18th century for their wintertime. The concept of, working hard at maybe preparing all year your firewood to make sure it was going to get you through the wintertime, because it was like, it's straight up survival, right? If you can't cook, if you can't, melt ice to have water, you're in a lot of trouble. So how much important that was, and how they were dealing with not having the right kind of clothing for that, especially situations. Or we read about Joseph Martin and the military basically never having the right kind of equipment, clothing, blankets, whether that's happening with the soldiers or, poor people in the time period, that's a constant issue.
Okay.
I'll take a breath and let Lauren jump in.
All right, that sounds like a great plan. I got a couple super chats here. This first one's from Mandatory Carrie. Thank you. We'll watch after I get home. So wait at the beginning of the stream. And then here's Speed and Style Tony. New merch, chicken nugget coat. So
I used to have a sleeves waistcoat that was very chicken nugget color.
Yeah. It'd be perfect. And then if you wanted to go out and maybe fried chicken is what you should be selling with the.
There you go.
Oh, and then this one's from Max Arcool. Wishing a cozy and peaceful winter to everyone.
Yes.
And there is a comment here from someone. Let me see if I can find it again. Okay, yes, this is from Zon Lord. Hey John, wanted to thank you for the inspiration your cooking has given me in the last year. I've made my own modern gourmet pemmican thanks to your videos on the subject.
Wow, gourmet pemmican.
I do feel like with a little bit of help, pemmican is just like delicious.
If you can do it. I mean, obviously, in the time period, there were some pemmicans that were highly sought after, and they were, haute cuisine, if that's what you would call it. Anyway, and then there's the regular pemmican you make that is, it's like, okay, I'll eat this if that's what it takes for me to survive, because it's not very tasty.
Okay, here's a challenging question. What's your favorite fermented food?
That might take me a while. It depends on what you classify as fermented. There are cold fermented sausages that I really like. But I'm not a giant fan of things like pickles or sauerkraut or.
I feel like sauerkraut, when cooked with sausage, it's.
If you cook sauerkraut with sausage and a whole bunch of mashed potatoes, okay, I'll go for that.
Okay, I don't know. I don't have a lot of questions, so I think we're all caught up.
So, super thank you to folks that have been, spending time on our marathons, and we've been had a lot of success with marathons here, and it's interesting to see how people are using them. Comments about how people are using them. Some people at work doing a kind of job where they, you can't change the video. It's just like, I need something to play, and that's been. Very, very wonderful on our channel for us as we continue to make content and kind of put those things together in long form. And the Christmas marathon is out, and we had to play around the thumbnail a little bit, but we got there, and people are enjoying those Christmas videos all put together in a nice long form. It has been tremendous. I really am very interested to see how the hot drinks episode turns out. I think that's going to be, it's going to turn out to be like twice as long as I expected it to be, and it was going to be long. So, we talked about the video here for an entire hour, and I really didn't get into any great quantity of the content. You guys were mostly just popping in questions the entire time. So, that's going to be a mega episode again, not this Sunday, but the Sunday after that. So we got lots of crazy fun stuff coming up. Thank you, folks, for all your merch purchases here. If you probably been just, the tree you have at home has probably all got, mugs under it and everything else. So thank you so much for your incredible support for what we do here on the channel. Anything else before I jump out of here?
No, I don't think so.
Super thank you to Lauren, who helped me with the pictures today. I picked out most of them, but she did all the real work on it. Yeah?
I do have one last thing. This is a super chat from Jorn the Atlantean. I wish the crew from Townsend a Merry Christmas season, good health, and many more videos. Also, sausages also taste good with cooked and cut kale, preferably with smoked cured ground pork sausages. And that sounds like a perfect winter meal.
Oh, yeah. Also, special thank you to Ivy, who's running the console over there, making it happen. So, hope you guys have a wonderful weekend, and thank you so much for joining me today.